Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to another interesting session from Economicspedia. So as you can see written on the board, today's topic of discussion, which is a very important and yet a very conceptual and interesting topic from advanced microeconomics. The topic here is indirect utility function, and the related function with it is the expenditure function. Now, when we talk about indirect utility function, what is the first thing that strikes? From which area this comes from? It is coming from the consumer theory, right? So, consumer theory, here naturally the demand function is involved. Here naturally the IC is involved, that means the preferences of the individual. Here naturally the budget function is involved. What are the other things that is involved? The consumer. Since we are talking about consumer theory, of course the consumers are there. And once these consumers are there, what is that we are ultimately wanting to find? Their reference bundle. Suppose X1 is good number 1. So what is the optimal unit of consumption for this X1? And if there is another commodity, let's say X2, what is the optimal bundle, consumption bundle for X2? Like this, so on and on. So this is what the consumer theory basically does. This is the basic, right? Alright, now coming to this indirect utility function, what is this? Basically, so first of all, let me just walk you through what this whole session is going to be, right? So in this session, we will be talking about the indirect utility function as well as the expenditure function, the definition, the meaning, how they are different and yet how they are related, and also at the end we will be discussing the properties of these theories. So hold on till the last minute of this session so that you don't miss out the properties of the two. Alright, so coming to the indirect utility function. So here the indirect utility function is basically means the what is the maximum utility the consumers can gain by spending the income they have or the prices of the commodities. Okay, so here the indirect utility function, this is very easy to remember, not just to understand, but what is this indirect utility is actually providing? It provides us the maximum utility level that any consumer can attain by spending his or her income. I'm representing income as M for the commodity prices. Okay, so indirect utility function provides us these things, the maximum utility that the consumer can attain. Now in contrast to this, you have to remember one thing, that for the indirect utility function the whole income needs to be spent. There shouldn't be any savings. Okay, that is one thing that should be very clear. Here whole income to be spent. If this is not done, then the maximum utility, what will be the maximum utility that the individual can attain, is not possible to capture that. Okay, so this is the main thing that you have to remember. And of course the prices of the commodities, they are unchanged, they remains unchanged, right? Okay, now with this, a very similar concept in microeconomics, rather advanced microeconomics, is the expenditure function. Expenditure function, it is also known as the duality of the indirect utility function, and we will find, and we might have find some of the questions like that. Prove that expenditure function is the duality of the indirect utility function, or the reverse one, or how can you derive indirect utility function from the expenditure function. These questions we all have faced, or we are going to face in the upcoming exams if any of you are preparing for that. Okay, so if you want to search for that exact answer that I just mentioned the questions for, please contact us. The contact details are appearing on your screen. Also, you can find the contact details below in the description box. Just go ahead, contact us. We will be helping you out, right? Okay, now coming to expenditure function. This is what the first point. It is the duality of indirect utility function. So, in the indirect utility function, we used to capture the maximum utility that can be achieved. Correct? In the expenditure function, we will be trying to capture the minimum cost to attain the maximum or the highest level of utility. The minimum cost. This is our main objective to find when we talk about the expenditure function. What is the minimum cost for the particular consumer or particular individual that we are concerned about? That can be achieved. And here also you will find that the income and the prices of the commodities are again involved in this expenditure function equation as well. Alright, now in a moment I will be discussing the objective function as well as the constraint for this indirect as well as the expenditure function. But before that, I would like to point out one more important thing regarding the indirect utility function. It is very much related with utility maximization problem. So indirect utility function is very much related with the utility maximization problem or theory, whatever it is. Why this is so? What is the main objective of utility maximization problem? Here the objective is to find the maximum utility, right? Maximum utility of whom? The consumers. That can be achieved by satisfying the budget constraint. And what is the budget constraint? There is income, there is prices of the commodities, right? So this is how the utility maximization problem, we can very much relate it to that of indirect utility function. So where the basic difference between the two lies. The indirect utility function, this is actually the value. It provides us the value of the utility, maximized utility. Whereas in the indirect utility function, we can only find the range of it. But indirect utility function gives us the exact value of it. So this is basically a value function. This is very important. This is indirect utility function is a value function. Of course, here the value function is obtained where the variables are the prices and the income of the particular individual. That is the budget constraints variables, right? So this is another important point. Now, let's come one by one to discuss the objective function as well as the budget constraint for these two, right? Starting with the indirect utility function. Here, the objective function is the utility function. For now, I am considering only two variables, okay? Let's say x1, x2, the prices are p1, p2 and the income I am considering it as m and the utility level I am considering it as u. So the objective function, let's say u of x1, x2, this needs to be maximized, right? So here maximization of utility subject to what? The budget constraint. What is the budget constraint? m equal to, since I am considering only two variables here or two commodities here, the budget constant goes like this, right? Or in general format, I'm going to write that after, this is the problem for the indirect utility function. So after solving, what we will get? We will get something in terms of P and M. The prices, of course this is the price vector, and this is the income of the individual, and here we have u of x1, x2 subject to m p1 x1 plus of p2 x2, that goes on. Okay, so this here, let me mark it out with this this one here is our indirect utility function, and in this indirect utility function we can find the variables here are the P and M, and this V, it represents basically nothing but the value function that I have mentioned that indirect utility function represents or shows. Okay, so in general format also we can write, just remove this x1 and x2 with the x, right? Okay, now coming to the expenditure function, and let's understand the expenditure function's objective as well as the budget constant. So again the variables remains the same, and quickly coming to that expenditure function. Okay, so here the objective function, again this is what the objective is, what, to minimize the cost, right? So here it is minimization of the budget constraint, because this is the cost the individual is facing. If he or she is willing to have the two commodities, this is the amount that the individual need to spend. This needs to be minimized, subject to what? The utility. Subject to the utility of the individual. Okay, so this is basically the problem for the expenditure function. And after solving, of course here also we get a particular value of m. We can represent it as m bar, right? So this is basically what? In the previous case this was the budget constant, right? In the previous situation this was the budget constant, and this was the objective function, and here it is just the opposite of it. Therefore we can say this expenditure function is the duality, of the indirect utility function. Okay, however this is I have not shown the explicit version of the proof. If you are interested, do let us know. The details are appearing on your screen, or you can also find the details in the description box. Alright, now without any further ado, let's just quickly move to the properties of the two. However, the properties of the two are very important. There are many situations we find this question to write down the properties. Is there any difference, true, false? Many forms of questions are there when it comes to indirect utility function, expenditure function. Even in the past years of the many competitive exams, to name a few, starting with the Indian Economic Services plus SEBI, RBI Grade B DPR, there are many exams which are focusing on the advanced microeconomics part, and there you have these questions related to this part. Properties. The first one that I am going to take is the indirect utility function. Now, in my discussion in the starting of today's session, I have said that this indirect utility function is related with utility maximization problem. So therefore what? The assumptions of this utility maximization problem also holds in case of indirect utility function, which includes the consumers are rational. Along with it, they have convex preferences, non-satiated convex preferences, right? Non-satiated convex. So these are coming from where? The indirect utility maximization problem. Since it is related to indirect utility function, therefore these also satisfies for the utility indirect utility function as well. Another important function is that this indirect utility function is homogeneous of degree 0. Okay. To understand what is this homogeneity of a function, do let us know. We are willing to take a separate class just to make you understand what is the difference between homogeneous function and homothetic function, which is again a very important topic from the mathematical economics. Okay, this is number second property. Coming to the third important property in the indirect utility function, although I have mentioned it in my discussion, whole income is spent. There is nothing left as savings. Whole income is spent, and along with it, the law of demand is hold. Law of demand holds. That means if, let's say, income goes up, we can find the prices goes down. I am hoping this part is not visible, so I am just writing it here. So by law of demand hold, we can find this as income increases, we can find the prices to go down or it reduces compared to the increase in income. Okay, so this is also an important property. And the fourth and the last property of indirect utility function is that it is quasi-convex in preferences. This is a very important properties, and however there is a proof for this properties as well. For all the properties rather, number 4 is that it is quasi-convex in preferences. This goes for again the indirect utility function. Okay, now all these proofs, properties are having proof. I am not able to solve or show it in this particular session. However, if any one of you willing to know the proofs of this indirect utility function as well as the expenditure functions properties, let us know, contact us, and we will be trying to help you out. Now, the next part, that is the properties of the expenditure function. Let's move quickly to that part and let's understand how the properties of the two are different. Since one is the duality of the another, it implies that there will be some differences in their properties as well. So the next part, I am going to focus in the properties of the expenditure function. To start with, number 1 is that it is homogeneous of degree 1 in prices. Okay, the degree of homogeneity is here 1 for the expenditure function. Next one, in terms of the expenditure function, in terms of P and U is continuous. So in the expenditure function, the unknowns are basically the prices and the utility. One important difference is between the two. Here, the indirect utility function, the unknowns are price and income. In expenditure function, the unknowns are price and utility. Please remember this. Otherwise, you will find it a bit of confusing. Like कहाँ पे कौन सा unknown था, कौन सा known था. So please try to remember this. Okay. All right. So with this, it is continuous in terms of the two variables. Coming in terms of the variables again, it is non-decreasing in P, non-decreasing, and along with it strictly increasing in U, provided we have P much greater than 0. This is another important property for the expenditure function, and it has an amazing proof. So please note this down and remember them. Okay, with that, let's quickly move to property number 4 for the expenditure function. It is concave in prices. Okay, and if my utility function, it starts with an if the utility function is quasi concave, then function is quasi-concave, then the Shepherd's lemma hold. And there is an important proof which relates with this expenditure function and Shepherd's lemma. This proofs often comes. Any exam you pick it up. Your university exam, your college exam, your competitive exam, any exam you pick up, this last property proof is so important. So please mark it like this, that this is number one priority if you are practicing for the proof, right? So that's it for today's session. I hope this session was really helpful and it helped you clear the doubt, confusion between indirect utility function and the expenditure function from the advanced microeconomics. However, if you like the session, do hit the like button, and if you are new to our channel, please subscribe to our channel and also press the bell icon so that you never miss any update from our channel. Thank you, and I hope to see you all in my next session as my subscribers. Thank you.